Good morning. If you or someone you know finds yourself in a relationship crisis, how do you navigate that pain? A pain of lost dreams and expectations for yourself, but also for your children. You need courage, that is for sure, and hope in a God who will never let you down, even when you feel like all hope is lost. Jody Allen writes this: Jesus doesn't care about our track records or our reputations. He is all about redemption.
Hmm.
Today, we welcome Jody Allen, mom to a young adult twins, director of women's ministry at her church, and author of a book that you hope that you don't have to buy for yourself or for a friend, but I'm so glad she wrote it. Let me tell you the title: Hidden Heartache, Finding Courage When Your Husband Struggles with Pornography. Welcome, Jody. Tell us where
Thank you.
you're from and what fills your days these days since writing your book.
Thank you, Sue. I'm glad to be here. I live in North Carolina and my kids, both of my kids they just graduated from college a couple months ago. One is off doing her own thing, looking for a full-time job. And my son moved back home and he is going to grad school at a local college. So busy doing mom things. And then I have a geriatric black lab and I'm on staff at my church where I lead our women's ministry and I lead our first impressions team. And I've been on staff there for a little over 11 years. So busy,
Wow.
busy.
So great. I'm so grateful that you're willing to tell your story. I have read your book and it is very meaningful, not just for someone who's in your same situation, but I think for a lot of broken dreams. I'd like to talk about expectations. I think as women, we all dream that someday our prince will come. In fact, I remember when I got engaged finally at 35, that I was telling everybody that Mark was a cross between Jesus and Prince Charming, and my older married friends would just roll their eyes. No prince on earth is perfect, and but you have experienced a greater hurt than most. How did you wrestle with God about expectations when you first found out about your husband's betrayal through porn addiction?
Well, expectations, it's funny. uh, When I first discovered pornography on our computer, we were fairly newly married, and I remember taking him to the computer and showing it to him and crying together. And there's some level of compassion, but then there's this level of expectation after there is the after he says, okay, well, this is not going to happen anymore. And then you find out again
Oh,
that he's struggling with pornography again. Then you just get angry.
sure.
You kind of lose the compassion piece and you just get angry. Uh, and so that's just something I have to take before the Lord because you still need to be compassionate because this is a person who is struggling and this is a person who, I mean, he doesn't want this for his life.
Right.
And in 2013, when all of this came to a head, he said, I mean, this is the hardest thing that's ever happened to me, but the best thing that's ever happened to me because he had been living in such a hard place for such a long time. So I think that it's important to acknowledge that when our husbands are struggling with pornography, that a lot of times they're not having a good time. It
No.
may seem like they're having a good time, but they're not really having a good time because they're living in a stronghold.
Well, it's almost, it's like any sin. We try to hide it because we don't want anybody to know because of the
Hmm.
shame.
Hmm.
But it's not like we're very happy about it. We're miserable, but we
Right.
have to keep up a good front. What counsel can you offer from feeling disappointed with God and your circumstances?
There's this song. Oh, Sue, I just don't know if I can remember the name of it. There was this song that says, it's a worship song. And it was about never being disappointed with God. And I remember talking to a friend of mine and I said, I don't know if I can really sing that song and mean it because I feel like I've been disappointed with God.
Mhm.
And it does go back to expectation because I felt like we were doing all the right things. I mean, we got married and we were serving in our church and felt like we'd gone on mission trips and we were doing like all the right Christian things and had this expectation that this is, you know, God, we're doing this, so we're pretty sure this is what you're going to do because, not that that's biblical. I'm just saying that's just kind of how you think.
Right.
And when it doesn't happen like that, I feel like it's really easy to get disappointed with God. And so you really just have to work through that. I mean, counseling is super helpful. And then just a lot of internal work and staying in the word and what's actually true, what the Bible actually says about God.
Well, God does say a lot about blessing us, but I don't think he's necessarily a transactional God where if I do one, two, and three, he's going to bless me
Mhm.
with four, five, and six.
Right.
Um,
Right.
Something that really helped me years ago uh, was that I could ask God my questions because he was a big enough God for my questions,
Hmm.
and that the Psalms were in the heart of the Bible for the heart of man or women. I like what you said in your book that you said that being honest with God doesn't make you less of a Christian. Tell us more
Right.
about that.
Right. Well, I think that makes us more of a genuine Christian because if we are not honest, then we're kind of living a lie or we're living um, not in a real place, if that makes any sense.
It makes sense, and I think it's hard to go to sleep at night if you're feeling like you're faking out everybody.
Oh yeah, I have this person in my life that says all the time, "Fake it till you make it." And I'm like, well, I'm just not into that. I mean, I know sometimes we have to do things and then the feelings will follow, but as a general rule, I just don't feel like that's a great way to live, to fake it till you make it.
Well, for one thing, God knows all things. Now,
Right.
you are a director of women's ministry, and as you minister to women in your job, do you find that women who are struggling with a husband's porn addiction more difficult or more shameful than other reasons for a marriage breakup?
Hmm. I would say anything sexual in nature
Mm.
is more shameful, whether it's pornography, whether it is an affair, or anything along those lines. I think anything that is sexual of nature is just shameful in general. And I don't even, definitely within the church, but I don't even think that that's isolated to the church. I think that's in general in the
I think
culture.
so too. I agree. I like what you said about shame can trick us into believing that silence is the best way forward. Elaborate more on that.
Hmm. Well, because shame is what keeps men, well, and women who are struggling with pornography, but shame is what keeps men from saying anything about it because they don't want to be perceived as this I don't want to say pervert, that's not the right word, but if they don't want to be perceived as something bad. And so, but the enemy keeps us women, the wives, in shame as well because we don't want to be perceived as maybe we are less than or
Hmm.
we're not enough or we're not doing the right things in our marriage or it just makes us seem like there's something wrong with us. And I feel like in the church, I feel like it's easy for Christian women to fall into the um it makes it look like there's something wrong with me. So then they don't say anything.
Because they don't want to be cast as the victim.
I don't know if they don't want to be cast as a victim. Probably that's part of that. But I think that
It's embarrassing.
it's embarrassing. It's just flat out embarrassing. It's humiliating. It's just all of that. Yes, for
How,
sure.
how, as in all things with sin, but how did it help to know that the enemy of our soul, Satan, was on the attack? Did that bring more despair or no?
I think that brought perspective
Mm,
because then you know who the real enemy is. Now, I'm not saying that's easy to navigate that when you have a husband who struggles with pornography because it still feels like the husband is the enemy.
sure.
And that's just something to work through. But I think knowing who the real enemy is gives a better perspective and can help you maybe see the situation maybe with more compassion.
Mm. I can still see where anger would come up, though.
Oh yeah, that was the biggest thing for me because again I think it goes back for me it goes back to that expectation once that because pornography had surfaced several times in our marriage and once you have the expectation three four five times in
Mhm.
then it's not there's no compassion for that. It's more like, okay, this is what you said, but this is the way it is. And then you're just
Yeah.
angry. I was very angry for a long time.
Well, I don't blame you. I remember thinking that the main thing that I wanted my girls um, to find in a man is integrity. And
Hmm.
integrity is saying what you mean and meaning what you say.
Hmm.
And it's
And
hard to do.
integrity, I'm sorry, go ahead, Sue.
No, go ahead.
And integrity just encompasses so many things. It's honesty. It's being trustworthy. It's just so many things. It's not just that one word.
Right, of course. Um, you wrote, while God fights for us, the enemy fights against us. Satan is giving his best effort to destroy our lives. How can we fight against our enemy of our souls?
Hmm. Well, I think the truth, it's whatever the full answer to this is, it has to have something to do with being in the Word, because that's where the truth is.
Mm,
And that's Jesus says that the Word is alive and active. And so we need that truth in our lives so that we can use that to fight the enemy. So whatever we're using, whether we're talking, if we're going to counseling, which I hope women are going to counseling, or we have, great support system, or we're doing all the right self-care things and we're doing all the things, we have to be in the Word. We just have to be in the Word.
mm. Was there a particular verse that helped you during that time?
Oh, yes. So Proverbs 3, 5, and most people just lump 5 and 6 together, but I don't. So Proverbs 3, 5 was trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Because I, Sue, do not understand why we live in a world that makes billions of dollars off pornography.
Mm,
I don't understand why we live in a world where families have to be torn apart by pornography. So I can never understand that. So I have to lean on my own understanding and what the Bible says.
mm. Yeah, that reminds me of a question that's coming up, but I'm going to wait. Oh no, it goes right here. You mentioned how overwhelming it was to try and handle all the questions that you received, as well as the questions that you were asking, like the one you just asked. How can a world make so much profit off of such evil things? And your only answer was, I don't know. And I loved hearing that. Is that a legitimate answer? And how were you able to come to terms with that being your only answer? I don't know.
The answer to
All your people were asking you, why is this happening to you? I don't know. Will your husband get better? I don't know. Why did you divorce? Well, you kind of knew, but these questions you probably were saying, God, why did you allow this to happen? He
oh
knew, but you don't.
right. I feel like that's a legitimate answer because it goes back to something we were talking about before. It's an honest answer. If we can't be real and we can't be genuine,
Mhm,
then it's hard to move forward. So I feel like there has to be that honesty of just saying, you know what, I don't know.
mhm.
And what that does is it just leaves the results up to God. It doesn't really leave the results up to me. If I can just say, Lord, I just really don't know. And you're the person that knows, so I'm going to have to stick with you.
Right. And sticking with God is the same way of saying that you're trusting God. And I
Right.
just read a quote from Mother Teresa this morning, where a guy was asking her to pray for him, and she said, "What do you want me to pray for?" And he said, "Pray for clarity." And she goes, "I will not pray for that." And he was startled, and she goes, "Clarity can become your idol.
Mm,
I'm going to pray that you trust God.
wow.
So when things are not clear, that you just trust Him, and that's what trust is." And I thought, that was so profound because we go to other people, we even go to the word for answers of what to do next. And he says, trust me. And we
Yes.
don't know what the next day will hold.
Yeah, so there is a balance between that, because God does give us wise counselors. I mean, I had two great counselors, but He is the ultimate counselor,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it's figuring out that balance between the earthly wisdom and the godly wisdom.
Right. And I was thinking in terms of not using I don't mean not to use a counselor. I meant that we don't really know what the next day will hold, and we think we
Mhm.
do. And that's why Jesus talks in Matthew 6, there's enough trouble in today's world, in today, for you not to have to be anxious about tomorrow.
Mhm.
And yet you and I
Yeah.
are planners. That's what keeps a house going. And but not to worship my plan. That I think
Right.
that's what Mother Teresa was probably getting out of
Yeah.
this guy.
Yeah.
You wrote, oh no, how important was it that you had a healthy, loving, and honest community to you as you went through your healing journey?
I have to say, having the body of Christ and people beside me was probably one of the best, I don't even know, things. I don't know what to call that thing. That is how I made it through. Certainly, I was in the Word and I was going to counseling, but having people around me who could invite me over for game night and who could cook for me or who would take care of my kids or um, fix my tire or whatever those things. And during that time, we had friends that's when we started doing life together. My husband moved out in September, so that meant Halloween was coming up. And in our house, free candy is good times.
Yeah.
And so we did not want to miss Halloween. So we started doing it was me and my kids and this two other families. And we started doing every Halloween together. We did every New Year's Eve together. We did the Super Bowls together for probably 10 years
Wow.
until they moved a couple years ago.
Mm,
And so that was such a huge part of the healing
huge.
process, just the body of
Yeah.
Christ.
And for
Huge part.
for your kids too, to see that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Mhm. You're right. We need a friend who has permission to remind you who you are and call you out when you're not acting like yourself or the person you want to be.
Oh, yeah. That was my friend Jen when I was ready to call it quits. And she said, Jody, this just doesn't sound like you. And that's when I was struggling before I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism. And that makes you, when you have a medical condition and you don't have and it's not treated,
Yeah.
your body
Help you. It
doesn't,
doesn't help you.
right, right. And so it is just refreshing to have somebody who can, Jody, this is not who you are. You probably need to go to the doctor.
Hmm. Yeah. So great. Now, every woman's situation is unique, but is there a time for divorce versus trying yet again?
That is such a loaded question,
I
Sue. I know that when I left my marriage, I know that I needed to be 100% certain that I had done everything that I could.
know.
And I feel like trying and trying and trying and trying is worthwhile for sure. But I think maybe there does come a time for some women where the husband is just unwilling to do what needs to be done to be a participant in their marriage.
Right. Yeah.
So I think that there is definitely, we have to persevere. We've got to do whatever we got to do to see if we can save our marriage. Absolutely. But I do think there does come a time, and it's probably different for different marriages and different people, when you just get to the point with the Lord and say, okay, this is done. This is done. As hard as that may be.
Right. And that is clarity. And that is trust in
Yeah.
the Lord. I had a
Yeah.
friend who said she told her ex-husband, who wasn't quite ex yet, that she forgave him and she was willing to move forward. He goes, well, I'm not. Well, she can't move
Wow.
forward if he's not willing.
Wow. Yeah.
It's very, very painful.
Yeah.
Um, what is the difference in your mind between forgiveness and trust in a person?
Well, I think that we can forgive somebody without trusting them. I mean, just because we have forgiven a person doesn't mean that we have to put ourselves back in another situation where they can hurt us again. So it's a little bit of, uh, it's almost like I'm just totally making this up off the cuff, but it's like it's forgiveness with the guardrail, where trust is just I'm giving my heart to you
Forgiveness with a
with the
handrail.
guardrail.
That's good.
Sue, I totally just made that up.
I like it. What has helped you most in helping your kids come to terms with their dad's addiction and your divorce? Is that too personal
Well,
a question?
no, that's not too personal. But I will say that I have not been the person who's done that. My ex-husband and I have a great co-parenting relationship. When my son has soccer games at college, we ride together. So we have a great co-parenting relationship, but he has been very forthright with them on how addiction has affected his life and clearly how it's affected our family. So I haven't really had to do that.
Mm,
He has been very forward in having that discussion with them. It's certainly probably not now because it's been a little bit of time, but certainly initially
mhm.
he was very clear with them that addiction can wreck your life.
Wow. Well, you know that this podcast is on living a legacy life. How do you not let this tragedy with your husband shape or determine your legacy?
I think that that's a hard one because shame is a big part of that season, and but shame is a liar. And it tells me that my legacy's tarnished, and that's, because of my divorce, that I'm not a good example of a godly woman. Or and sometimes it just takes effort not to just want to crawl on the rock and let shame take over. But
Sure.
actually, this I have the same message, the same legacy that I want to leave that I had before my marriage ended. And that was, I still want my life to matter for the kingdom. And just the way I go about it looks different than it did before and different than I thought it would.
Sure.
But the legacy I want to leave is the same. And my legacy isn't about pornography or betrayal or divorce. It's about healing, it's about courage, and really just trusting the Lord even through the hard stuff.
Mm. You end each chapter with a call to courage. What made you use that title rather than just a call to action?
Oh, because there's so much shame involved with divorce. Like when we were figuring out the title, we spent a lot of time on that title, just hidden heartache, 2 words, because it is so hidden. There is so much shame. So I felt like courage had to be it. That's exactly what it is. It's courage. It takes women. It takes a lot of guts. It takes a lot of gumption. It takes a lot of courage to do some of those things that are called the courage and to address the issue of pornography in your marriage, just because of the shame.
Mm. And it can be healed, though, right?
I believe that it can absolutely because the Bible says that all things are possible with God. Because if there was no hope of healing, then what are we even doing here? Why do we even bother with counseling? So absolutely, there's hope because everything is possible with God.
um, I commend your church because, as director of women's ministries, they wouldn't always hire someone who's been divorced.
Well, here's the interesting thing: is I did not have my job. I was a stay-at-home mom when all this happened.
Wow.
And but in that process, when my husband first moved out, he was at a treatment center. They came to me and said, "We've got this job, and it's morphed into other things. It started with first impressions and morphed into like from a part-time to a full-time job with different things in the mix." But I actually was still married at the time, but um, there was a good possibility that I was going to be divorced. And so they just came and said, "Jody, we have this job. Would you be interested?" Well, I
Wow.
knew that I was probably going to need a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I took a job. And so I commend them too because it was very messy.
Yeah.
It's a very messy situation. And I have felt, I mean, I have my internal dialogue where I feel condemned
Mm, sure.
about being divorced, but I have never received that from our staff or from our church. But a couple months ago, I was on
Mm,
a women's retreat and it was with another church, and I was kind of going to learn and see what they do so we could take some of their ideas and use it for ours. And there was a song by, oh my gosh, Zach Williams. I may have had that wrong. It's called Made for More.
mm,
Josh Baldwin, that's his name, Made for More. And there is a line in that song that says, "Why would I make a bed in my shame when a fountain of grace is running my way?"
mm,
And it's like God said to me at that very part in the song, He says, "Jody, why are you living in this shame?
mm,
You do not have to live this way."
mm,
And it
mm,
was like I was able to make that choice. Okay, you know what? I'm not going to keep living this way.
mhm. In regards to embodying the welcoming heart of God, how have you been able to host, so to speak, other stories in comfort and faith because of your story?
Hmm. I think probably simply just by listening, because when a woman shares her story with me, if she does it in person or she sends me an email, I know the heartache and the courage that it took just for her to say those words out loud. And so I feel like the best way that I can host other women's stories is just listening and reminding her that of what's true and that there's hope.
Mm. Say that again. When you listen, you know when a woman shares, you know the hurt and shame that she's feeling.
Yeah, when a woman shares her story with me, I know the courage, I know the hurt that it took for her to say those words out loud.
Mhm. Well, that's so true with any pain. You offer some free resources on your website. Which is your favorite, and do you want to describe them?
Um, I think that my favorite resource that's free that I actually don't even have, I don't think it's even on my website, is a feelings wheel, which I'm happy to provide that to your listeners. Or really, they can go to feelingswheel.com and just find it themselves. But I love a feelings wheel. When my husband was at the treatment center, we had the opportunity to go and they gave us a feelings wheel and they said, take this feelings wheel and you need to say your feelings this way. I feel blank about blank because.
Oh, yeah.
And for 2 hours, I remember sitting at McDonald's just writing because I think we can get stuck in the whole I feel happy, mad, or sad. Because when we grow up, those are the emotions we think about. But a feelings wheel gets us out of that and like I feel discontented or I feel discouraged or I feel unworthy.
Mhm.
Just having those emotions, I think it's make it very helpful and it just helps you move forward.
Mhm. So how can people find you?
They can find me on my website at jodyallenwrites.com or I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Jody Allen Writes. Jody
And
Allen Writes.
how do you spell your last name, Allen? Because there's different ways.
It is Allen.
Okay. And you graciously are giving away a copy of your book, which I highly recommend. You don't have to show anybody that this is what you got because of the subtitle, but maybe you know somebody who needs this book desperately. So if you would comment on my Instagram this week or on Facebook or just email me, sue@welcomeheart.com, I am happy to put you in the contest. Thank you, Jody. You've been delightful and God bless your ministry.
Thank you, Sue.
Are you stuck in a box of shame? I think that can be one of the worst parts about not really receiving the grace and mercy that God has provided. It doesn't really matter our situation, God can break through all of that shame. If you'd like to talk to me or email me about more about that, or Jody, you can reach me at sue@welcomeheart.com. God bless you.